Alright, so today I want to give you an update on my Scaleless Head project here in my collection. I actually have quite a few Scaleless Head ball pythons. I got into the project about 3 years ago, and it's kind of an interesting, kind of a new cutting edge project that if you take two Scaleless Heads and breed them together, 25% of the time you end up with a completely scaleless ball python where you strip away all the scales. And when I first got into it about 3 years ago, over on Morphmarket, there was only ever one totally scaleless ball python that was ever produced. And if you actually start looking at some of the scaleless over there in Morphmarket, there's quite a few. You'll notice that when you strip away the scales, essentially you get a completely different visual appearance for the snake. So you can have like a Mojave and then you strip away the scales and it doesn't look like a Mojave. It is pretty amazing the difference. You almost have to relearn all your morphs going to the scaleless side. It's kind of interesting. And today what I want to do is I just kind of want to go through my collection. I want to pull out all my male and female scaleless heads, get a weight on them, and kind of show you how they're doing. And I don't think I'll ever need to breed this year, but maybe next year I'll finally get some totally scaleless ball pythons. Alright, so take a look at this beauty. This is Crusher. We named this one Crusher. And this is a lesser scaleless head male. And this one's one of the ones I held back from last year. And look at how big and beefy it is for only being 1 year old. Pretty awesome. And that's the difference between a ball python that likes to eat and a ball python that doesn't like to eat, like some of my ones from the year before. Sometimes it can get pretty frustrating. And it looks like this guy's at least 500. You have to have at least 500 grams on him in order to breed the female. So if we take a look at this, he is just over the minimum, 561 grams. Although I actually bred some of my males that were 1 year old this year, and I kind of had a bust with some of those really young males. Sometimes they can be up to size and they just don't have the maturity to figure it out with the females. Sometimes you're really taking a risk breeding males the very first year. Sometimes you can have a lot of luck, and sometimes your season can be a bust if you're breeding snakes too young. So I was thinking maybe breeding this one to maybe my lesser female. I have two lesser females. If I could breed it back to it, I could actually get a Scaleless Head blue-eyed leucistic from this guy, which would be really awesome, working towards a completely scaleless blue-eyed leucistic. And of course this guy wants to run now. I really don't handle him too much. They're not really super skittish, but I don't handle them like every day, kind of like Bobby. I know I always handle Bobby every day, quite a long time making videos. And the kind of the interesting thing with the Scaleless Head, you can notice on the very top of the head, it has some scales missing. From the very top of the head, you can almost barely see it. Sometimes you can see a lot of scales missing from the head, and sometimes you can't see hardly any scales missing. Sometimes you can't see any at all. As a matter of fact, I've hatched some out that didn't have any scales at all, and I thought they were normals. I marked them as normals, and then I figured out there's a trick that you can do to figure out if your scaleless heads without a scaleless head is actually really a scaleless head. And the trick to doing it is you can actually look right under the vent, right where they go to the bathroom, and the scale right before the vent on the scaleless heads is split in two. So if you, I don't know if you can take a look at that, right before the vent, it's like a horizontal split right in the scale. You can see that last scale right there is split into two scales, and in a non-scaleless head, that last scale is one solid scale. It's not split into two separate scales, which I found very interesting. When I first got into scaleless heads, I went through every single scaleless head hatchlings. Like, I probably had like 15 or 20 of them, and every single one was split. And I went through all my other non-scaleless heads, and all of those were not split. So as far as I know here in my collection, that trick always works to determine if you have a Scaleless Head ball python. Alright, so take a look at this one. This is a Pastel Scaleless Head, and this is one of the, I'd say it's one of the more browned out versions of pastels. Some pastels are super bright yellow, and some of them, like this one, is really kind of browned out, and the older it gets on some of these pastels, the more browned out they get. And this one almost looks like it has some calico in the mix, and I do have some calico kind of floating around in my collection. I kind of wanted to get a quick weight on this girl just to kind of see where she's at. She's at 9 963 grams, right up against the 1,000-gram wall. And this girl's been so picky, she's only eaten just a few rodents this year, which is kind of crazy. And I've been feeding her, you know, trying to do live rats and frozen thawed rats and mice and everything else. And sometimes they can just be, they get to that point where they just get stuck for months and months, and then something just snaps, and then they kind of go crazy and then go back on food. And a lot of these scaleless heads have some interesting belly patterns. This one is kind of clear. A lot of times they'll have a little more high definition than a lot of your non-scaleless heads. It's kind of interesting how it kind of thins the scales on a lot of scaleless heads. This girl is definitely going to need at least one more year to get up to weight for breeding. All right, so here's another one. Take a look at this beauty. This is a scaleless head lemon blast. So this is the pastel and the pinstripe and the scaleless head. And you can see on this one, it has a really high definition scaleless head. A lot of scales missing from the top of the head. Take a look at that. Quite a few. There's no doubt that this one is definitely a scaleless head. You don't even have to look at the vent scales on this one. This one, the belly's pretty clear, which is typical on most of your lemon blasts. This girl is getting some pretty good weight to her. And let's see if we can get a weight on this one and see what she's at. She's getting pretty close, 1,234 grams. And she's, you know, all these snakes, for some reason, they've been really super picky all this year. They get up this one's pretty much been up against the 1,000-gram wall. So I don't think I'll breed this one this year. I'll give her one more year. Hopefully she'll snap out of that fast and actually go back on food. But take a look at the pattern on this one. As a matter of fact, this one almost looks like it has some enchi in it. As a matter of fact, you know what? I think this one does have enchi in it. I actually proved out that my some of my snakes do. I kind of have some enchi floating around in my collection, and I have some calico that I didn't really know I had kind of floating around. So there's a couple different things that I kind of pop out something like this. And you see the really reduced pattern on this one. That is probably due to some enchi in there. Although sometimes the scaleless head can kind of throw you off and change the pattern a little bit too. All right, so take a look at this. I actually have another lemon blast scaleless head, which is pretty cool. They're both females, born in the same year, and they're probably both just shy of 1,500 grams. I could take a weight on this one and see what she's coming in at. She's coming in at 1,079 grams. Definitely up against the 1,000-gram wall. These, I don't know what's going on with these girls. They just will not eat. They have some really good body condition for only eating a few rodents this year. These ball pythons, sometimes they can kind of drive you batty. If you take a look at the scaleless head expression on this female, look at how many scales she has missing from her head. It is probably the baldest scaleless head that I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, the male that I have, the original male, as a matter of fact, I sold my original male. It had a really high expression scaleless head like in this girl. And when I started buying scaleless heads, the really high expression with a lot of scales missing from the head were selling for sometimes twice as much as the ones with just a few scales missing from the head. And now I don't think it really matters one way or the other. This girl's really beautiful. And as a matter of fact, we can kind of take a look. I don't know if we can look at her belly and her vent scales on this one. She's kind of freaking out, but you can definitely see on that one, it is definitely split in two on that vent scale right there. So you definitely can tell that this one it's pretty obvious with the scales missing from the head, and looking at the vent scale that this one is a scaleless head. So here's another scaleless head female that I have. As a matter of fact, this one is 50% het caramel albino. So there's a 50% chance that this girl carries one copy of the caramel albino gene. I actually have some males. I think I have 3 males that are 50% het caramel albino. So you know what I'm thinking? I'm trying to actually take one or more of those males, breed it with this girl. Hopefully this girl actually contains the caramel albino gene. And the first shot, if I could breed them with one of those males, I could potentially get a totally scaleless caramel albino ball python. It would be the first one probably ever produced, which would be pretty awesome. And I can definitely guarantee you this is probably like 1,000 grams on this girl. 924. These girls are just really slow to grow. This one's really deep in shed, and she just has just a few scales missing right from the top of her head. It's a really awesome project to be into, and let me tell you, some of these projects can be a really long game. Alright, so this is actually a male scaleless head. This is just a straight male scaleless head, 50% het caramel albino. So there's a 50% chance that this contains one copy of the caramel albino. So essentially what I did is I took my original male scaleless head with no other genes in the mix and I bred it to a female that is 100% het caramel albino. That's how I produced this one. And I actually held back 3 of these and I was looking through my rack. As a matter of fact, I sold one of them to clear up my rack space for my triple heads, my albino clown pine triple heads, and I got rid of one of these. So now I'm down to 2, and I'm breeding, as a matter of fact, I'm breeding these 2, this one and another one just like it, back to those 100% het caramel albino females, shooting for, trying to prove out the caramel albinos in this. So there's a 50% chance that this one is het. So it's kind of weird with the percentages. So this one right now is a 50% het, but if that female lays eggs and I get some visuals, then this becomes 100% het, because then we'll prove it out and we'll know 100% of the time that this carries one copy of the caramel albino. And I can get a weight on this guy real quick and we'll just take a look. And you know, I bred him this year and he bred just fine. He is 712 grams on this guy, so he's definitely big enough. And look at the belly on some of these scaleless heads with no other genes in the mix. So like for a caramel albino, like a het caramel albino, you really won't get any kind of tracks or belly marks. It almost looks like his head pied or something down the side, and that's kind of how the scaleless head acts in a lot of cases. And sometimes you can actually feel almost like little, almost like kind of like a different texture on the side of this snake, almost like little bumps, like the scales are kind of bumpy. It's kind of weird how the scaleless head actually acts, kind of transforming, and you know, some of the brightness and the pattern and the feel of the scales and the belly. It really enhances the snake overall. Just one copy of the scaleless head. So here's my other male scaleless head with no other genes, 50% het caramel albino. I actually bred both of these back to those 100% het caramel albino females, and they both locked. Hopefully I'll get eggs. I don't know, one of them just went back on food, one of those females, so I'm not sure I'm actually gonna get anything from that one, but I'm hoping the other one will lay. And look at kind of the weird belly pattern on this one, pretty typical of your scaleless head. And I can get a weight on this guy. He was, I think he was about 700 grams when I was breeding him, and he's still about 700. He's 681, so that's a pretty good weight to breed him. And these guys are 2 years old. I'd say if you're breeding ball pythons, it's probably best to have your males 2 years old and, you know, fully mature before you breed them. You can breed them after a year like that lesser, but you're really taking a risk breeding them that young. Alright, so I want to show you this snake just as a size comparison to those 2-year-old scaleless heads. This is actually the same age as those scaleless heads, pretty crazy. This is actually a lemon blast bamboo. So this is the bamboo pastel pinstripe, and look at how big and beefy she is. And that is the difference between a snake being a really picky eater and actually feeding reliably. This one, I'm thinking this one's eating better because it has bamboo in the mix, and the bamboo, for some reason, they just eat really well. And I want to get a weight on this one. I'm thinking about breeding her for the first time this year, and she's definitely getting to the point where she's up to weight. She is 1,707 grams. Pretty awesome. And I'm not quite sure what to breed her with. I was thinking maybe if I did that lesser scaleless head to this one. The only problem is that if I actually hit the blue-eyed leucistic, which is the lesser bamboo, I would probably end up with an all-white snake, and I wouldn't know if that white snake had pastel or pinstripe in the mix. So it's kind of tricky when you have multi-gene combos and you're shooting for something like that. But I'm not sure exactly. The other thing I could kind of do, which would be really awesome, is breed Bobby to this one, and then I would end up, if I got the white snake, it would be a super bamboo, possible lemon blast super bamboo, which would be really rare. There's not a whole lot of super bamboos out there. So I'm thinking maybe I could do that. Or what I could do is I could use one of Bobby's offspring. I have a bamboo calico that I could breed to this. Then I have the bamboo, the calico, the pastel, and the pinstripe, and I could shoot for 2 copies of the bamboo for the super bamboo blue-eyed leucistics. That's probably what I'll do. All right, so there you have it. That is an update on my Scaleless Head ball pythons. Pretty amazing project. As a matter of fact, when I first started in Scaleless Heads, the Scaleless Heads, without any other genes in the mix, were selling for $45,000 a piece. It was pretty amazing. A brand new project. And then when I bought it, you know, I actually bought into the project for about $1,200. I thought I was doing pretty good. And now they're just a few $100s for a Scaleless Head, which is pretty crazy. And a lot of people can, you know, over the years, they can get discouraged if they buy really high and then it falls really fast. But the thing you really have to keep in mind with the Scaleless Heads is that if you breed two of them together, you get the Super, which is a totally scaleless ball python. So it almost becomes like a recessive project trying to work other genes into the totally scaleless ball python, which is, I'd say it's probably equivalent to working, you know, with the clowns or the pieds or something like that. Everyone, in this case, you can actually see the hets. You don't really call them hets because it's a co-dominant morph, but you can actually see one copy of the gene, the Scaleless Head, but the, you know, really kind of the long-term project is the completely scaleless ball python. So what I want to leave you with is I actually had a duck egg that hatched kind of off topic. And I thought it was so cute, just barely hatching out of the egg. It's a cayuga duck, a completely black duck. I had some out about a week and a half ago and they're getting really big, and I hatched another dozen. I bought them on eBay and I thought, you know, it'd be good to kind of increase the flock during the summer so I can have some duck eggs in the winter. And it's a really cute duck just hatching right out of the egg. So I'm going to leave you with that video right at the end here. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. All right, so take a look at this. This is a brand new baby black cayuga. Brand new out of the eggshell. Just hatched just now. And I have 6 in the incubator. I'm gonna grow them up a little bit and then put them with my other ducks. So cute.